that Deb Gardner gives to us on a daily basis. As I mentioned last week, our goal in the colloquium is to demystify or to throw more light, to provide a more complete picture of India in order to broaden and deepen our understanding of this rather complex country. Last week's speaker, Mr. Ed Luce, gave us a wonderful introduction, painting a picture of the rather dramatic changes, economic, social, geopolitical, taking place in India. To hear that income is doubling in 11 years instead of 65 is dramatic economic change, particularly when we compare it to the life expectancy of the average Indian today, which is only 63 years. So that is dramatic change indeed. The example he cited of a road accident where the two drivers cannot be easily identified in terms of their social status and social power based on their clothing and other visible markers was an illustration of the dramatic social changes taking place in India as well. In tonight and future presentations, our speakers will present in greater detail some of these topics. I lost my page. For instance, Dr. Asima Sinha will address the economic implications of the revolution of rising expectations in India on October the 13th. And on October the 20th, we will have two speakers who will address the role of women in Indian society. Tonight, we are very privileged to have as our speaker Mr. John Jeffcoat from Seattle, Washington, who will provide his own personal perspective, a view from the ground, so to speak, of India and her people. His claim to fame in his young life, he's a young man, so his current claim to fame, because we hope that he will accomplish a lot of things in the future, is that he wrote the script for and directed a very, very funny movie called Outsourced. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but we did just find out that Holly's Video in Wakefield carries a copy, and John just autographed it, so you can see the autographed jacket cover. When I saw the movie, I saw it actually on a flight back from India. I just couldn't stop laughing. It's really, really a funny movie. But what I would like to quote is what a blogger wrote on the blog spot related to the movie. And the blogger wrote, "I just saw this wonderful film on DVD recently, and must say I really enjoyed it. It's one of the best comedies I have seen in a long while. I am not Indian, and although perhaps this film is not 100% accurate in depicting India, but I felt I learned more about India and its beautiful scenery, people, and culture from this film than any other Bollywood films." Please welcome John Jeffcoat.
Well, thank you, Ruby. Can everyone hear me back there? Okay, good. I wanted to say thank you to Ruby and Nick and all my other hosts here. This has been fantastic coming back to Rhode Island. I'm actually originally from New York. I went to Mamaroneck High School, grew up in Larchmont, and left to go to school in Ohio, and then moved out west, and I've been living in Seattle since '94. So it's great to be here, and I'm going to be giving a presentation that involves a bunch of slides, and also clips from my movie and other sort of behind-the-scene moments from my travels. And to begin, and also I'm very new to this whole PowerPoint sort of thing, so bear with me. I'm going to try to maneuver my way through it. My movie's called Outsourced. I co-wrote it with my friend George Wing, and it's loosely based on experiences I had traveling in Nepal and in India. And before I wanted to get too far into the talk, I wanted to show you a trailer for the movie so you kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. So hopefully, I think I have to plug the audio cable in. Just right over here. And is there audio? I don't hear audio. Is it this one? And as we will hopefully figure out, it was working just a little while ago, so we'll figure out the audio, and I'm going to show you, there we go, turn up nice and loud. And so this is just a brief trailer for the movie Outsourced.
I need you in my office.
Is this going to take a while?
Todd, we decided to restructure order fulfillment. Offshore the whole department. We need you in India.
It's a train station.
No way, no. I'm not going to India to train my own replacement.
All you need to do is visit the call center and make sure the new guy's up to speed.
Bro, what is that?
Oh, that is just a cow. Must have wandered in. 1 minute.
Basically, you people need to learn about America. Hold your nose and flatten the vowel like Chicago.
Chicago.
One review.
Not a good time.
Buddy, I assure you, I'm in Chicago.
Yeah, right.
Bro, this place is a disaster. I'll be stuck in India the rest of my life. My name is Todd. Everyone says Toad.
Are you Mr. Toad?
Mr. Toad. Mr. Toad, how sweet.
You realize you're not on vacation over there?
Yeah, like I would come here for vacation.
Listen, Tom, just a word of advice. I remember feeling like you do. I was resisting India. Once I gave in, I did much better.
It was a pleasure talking with you, Miss...
Bhatwadikar.
Some things I don't understand about American life. You hate your boss, and you don't like this company. Why not choose something else?
Why didn't you say anything?
Why didn't you say anything? I don't know how this country works.
Watch out!
You must dump!
Hi.
Hi. I don't know how to explain it. In my world, it just makes sense to work your ass off just so you can have that 50-inch plasma.
Someone's got to train the new guy.
Some of us do sound alike. There are over 1 billion of us, you know.
That's terrible.
Okay, so that's Outsourced. Now, before I start to talk about the movie and making the movie, I want to give you a little bit about how it all started. And my mother's probably watching online and now is horrified that I'm showing old family pictures. But you know, like I said, I grew up on the East Coast in suburbs of New York. I was the fifth of 6 kids and didn't really travel too much. You know, we traveled by car and we made it to Rhode Island, to the Ocean House once, and up to New Hampshire and things. But really, for the most of my life before college, pretty much spent it in this country and on the East Coast, although with trips to Tacoma to visit my grandparents. So basically what I knew was here. And I was also a very shy kid, and I wasn't too, I don't know, the idea of traveling outside of the country never was really, you know, something I thought about. And it was I think my mother, originally, she was a stewardess for Pan Am, and she used to travel, and she'd tell me stories about Morocco and these different places that she went to, and also had this little box of money from currencies from all over the world, and it always kind of was interesting to me, and it did definitely probably sparked my interest in the concept and the idea of traveling. But it wasn't till much later that I actually started to travel. I went to Denison University in Ohio, and I studied cinema in a small little thing. We had an old sorority house that had been converted into a cinema annex, and we had a real makeshift bunch of equipment that was bought at Army surplus stores and garage sales, and it was definitely a do-it-yourself kind of situation, and which was great because we got to learn about all aspects of filmmaking. Now, when my junior year came around, it was the opportunity to study abroad happened, and I knew I wanted to go away. I knew this was a great chance to travel, and in trying to decide where to go, it was like, well, should I go to England or Australia? And then, that seemed to be the choices that a lot of people were looking at. And at some point, I had taken a class in Hinduism and Buddhism, and it started me thinking about different parts of the world. And I had recently become a vegetarian, and so it was interesting, the idea of Southeast Asia. And I knew I wanted to go to the School for International Training through one of their programs, and I was looking through a course catalog, and in reading the description of the Nepal Studies program, I noticed they had something about cinema in there, and which was interesting to me. And part of what I really wanted to do was to get as far away from where I was as possible. I thought, and I'm not even sure what sparked this idea in me, because I was a pretty shy kid. I didn't really, like I said, I didn't travel much, and I think I shocked a lot of people when I told them that I was going to go to Nepal for my junior year. And it was, I don't think I was prepared for what was going to happen. I certainly didn't think a lot about it. I mean, when we were flying over the, in the plane, and the captain said, to your right, you'll see Mount Everest and the Himalayas. I was like, oh my God, I forgot. I didn't realize, I was in Nepal and there's Mount Everest. And, I just was thinking, I'm just going somewhere very different. And so, and my mother had warned me, like, when you land, it's going to be like a different world. And it really was when I landed. This is... That's me with my homestay father, and so I mean it was immediately a shocker, and it was absolutely an eye-opening experience. We originally arrived in Kathmandu, and we had a little quick orientation before they shipped us out to the very far west, where basically we drove until the street ended, and then they split us up into groups of 3 with a language teacher. And my particular village was another 2-hour trek into Nowheresville, where I stayed with this family. And this is my host father and his wife. And just to give you an idea, I mean, it was just nothing but terrace farms and no electricity, no running water. And a lot of these people had never seen a white guy before, let alone a 6'5" white guy with a giant pack and long hair. And I remember distinctly walking along a trail and coming around a corner, and there was these 2 boys playing, and they took one look at me and went flush and screamed and ran off like they just seen a Yeti, It was like they didn't know what it was, and it was just. It was kind of crazy, and everyone, just the staring alone, it was really, I think, the first time that I had ever experienced being a minority. I mean, I was in a village where a lot of them had never seen a white person before, and so, it was really an odd experience, and very, very sort of difficult to wrap my head around. And in this village, we'd just have our language. It was, I think, myself, 2 other students, and a language teacher, and we just kind of set up shop and do our little lessons wherever. And I remember one day we're doing our lesson, and there's a family walking by with their goat, and that was kind of nice. And then they'd come back about 15 minutes later, and one of them would be holding the head of the goat, and then this is the center square where they'd slaughter their goats before bringing them back for dinner. And and that sort of thing. And it was those kind of incidents which were common, and I was sleeping in a little mud hut. It had like 2 levels, and the cows would sleep in the lower level, and then I'd have a crawl space up top where I'd sleep, and I'd wake up to the sound of someone milking the cow, and then in about 10 minutes there'd be a knock on my little door, and I'd be given warm milk, fresh from the cow, and it was very tasty, and it was just amazing. I remember there was when we left this area, we were told ahead of time to maybe bring some T-shirts or some clothes as a gift to the host families. And when we were getting ready to leave, we took out our shirts and things that we gave, and they refused to take them. They were saying, "Well, we can't. What are you going to wear if we take your clothes?" And that was the start of my mind expanding, I think, and it was an amazing experience. The other thing I noticed was the women, in particular. There were these beautiful young girls and beautiful kids, and then there were these really sort of these older women who looked like they had really hard lives, and there didn't seem to be any women in the middle, in between. And I think, and what I realized was how hard women work in these countries, and it was just amazing. It was like the harder the women worked, the more prosperous the family was, and the less the man had to do anything. So a lot of times you'd see the men hanging out smoking cigarettes in the square, and it was a sort of a sign of status that they had strong women who could take care of all the business, so they could go relax in the square. And that was hard to see, but it was very common. And also, then a lot of times they'd spend the money on some booze, but I did find myself bonding more with the women than the men when I was over there. And again, this is some of the people in the house that I stayed in, and more of the kids. And then this is my house that I lived in, and up there is the little place where I slept. And another thing that happened was. When I first arrived, they brought me down to meet with the village elder. And so we sat down, they had a little mat, sat down, and we all sat down and gathered around, and no one spoke English. So we had my language teacher as a translator. And they sat me down, they started asking me a question in Nepali. And my teacher, I'd only been there for about a couple days, so I didn't speak Nepali. We just arrived in the village. I'd only been in Nepal about 3 days, so obviously I didn't have a very good handle on the language. But my language teacher kept saying, "What do you think he's saying?" And I was like, I have no idea what he's saying. And then he finally says, "Do you plow with oxen?" And I didn't know what to do with that. It was, and I hadn't, and then I was like, I don't know how to respond to that. I don't know what to tell him. And then so he asked me another question: "Do you milk water buffalo?" And again, it was this point when I was asked, "Do you plow with oxen?" that I realized how big the world was, and like how much more there is out there than I had experienced in my world in Larchmont, New York, in the U.S. And it was when I realized, like, this really was one of the best experiences and mind-opening experiences of my life. So I left my little village and came back to Kathmandu and met all kinds of interesting characters, including a group of supposed sadhus who were hanging out by the waterfront and doing their thing. And happy for me to take pictures of them and perform. And then after more studies in Kathmandu, I decided to explore the Himalayas, which I hadn't planned on. I actually at the time didn't even know what a fleece jacket, like fleece, was. I had all cotton, and that was a big mistake. Luckily, I had a friend, and I borrowed a fleece jacket, which came in very handy. And now that I live in the Northwest, I have many fleece jackets. But so I was invited. 4 other women in my group had planned a trip to a place called Ra Lake. It was one of the highest elevated lakes in the Himalayas, about 12,000, 14,000 feet. I can't remember exactly. And that didn't seem so high to me because I had friends who had come there specifically to hike to Everest Base Camp and to try to do 21,000 feet. So I felt like a real wimp. You know, man, we're going 14,000. You know, didn't realize later how high I was. But anyway, so we went on this hike, and I was invited by these 4 women in my group. So this is the 4 of us traveling together, and in the eyes of all the people in Nepal, it was me and my wives. And the funny thing was, these were very strong-willed women, and I was probably the shyest of the group, and probably the worst Nepali speaker of all of them. Yet, no matter where we went, the eyes were directed at me, and everyone addressed me first, and it drove them crazy. And it was frustrating at first, but then I just had to laugh. But again, it was another big part of the cultural differences. And we would stay at tea along the way. We opted away from the Everest Base Camp places because of all the stories we heard about trails being littered with toilet paper and crowded, and just, you know, we wanted something. At this point, we'd been in Nepal for about 3 months. We were all pretty fluent in the language, and we wanted a more rural experience. And so we went on this trip to Rara Lake, and it was a 7-day hike through the mountains. And we would just basically, the whole 7 days, we only ran into 2 other foreigners who were 2 people from the Canadian Peace Corps. And the rest of the time, it was all just goat herders, and people going along the trails with their goats. And it was really, truly amazing. And we'd had a tent that we'd camp out, or sometimes we'd go to a place like this, which is a tea hut, and you could rent a bed. And a lot of times the women in my group would go sleep in the tent, and I'd just pitch my bag on the ground somewhere. But this particular day, I decided I'd get a bed and sleep in the tea hut. And so I rented, you know, it was basically like a wood bench in this tea hut. And I went to sleep, and was woken in the morning. I think there was another person who had also, some traveler who had camped out there as well next to me. But I woke up to the sound, and it sounded like someone was peeing in the stall, like right next to my bed. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what is this doing? And pulling my legs up, and then I could feel something rubbing up against me, and then it sounded like someone else was peeing. And I was thinking, what the heck is going on? And I sit up, and I could see that the entire place was filled with goats. And they were all peeing all over the place. And I mean, I couldn't even see the floor. There were so many. I guess it started raining, and the herder brought them all inside. And it was just another one of these traveling experiences. And again, it's one of these things you learn. Traveling is about hardship, and it's also about these amazing experiences. And you have to have this constant balance. And be able to laugh at the hardships and the discomforts that you sometimes face. This is, again, just beautiful countryside that we went to in these little villages where, again, just very remote. At one point, we came across this guy came out of the woods with these kids out of nowhere, you know, a farmer, I guess, and approached me and started talking to us in Nepali, and he wanted me to take his daughter. He wanted me to take her to America. And it was really awkward. It was very sad. It was you could tell something was going on, you know, with just the looks they were all giving each other. But it was really, it took a little while to figure out what he was actually asking us, and then it became clear that he was wanting me to take his young daughter, who, you know, one of the 2 young daughters. So again, another kind of more difficult moment in the traveling. I later went on and did some independent study projects. One of them was with at a Bhutanese refugee camp. They were people of Nepali descent who had been recruited to go to Bhutan to work on highways and infrastructure projects, and then later were forcibly removed because they weren't Bhutanese. And a lot of them were English speaking, a lot of them were doctors. I mean, and they're all living in these huts in this refugee camp, and it was very difficult to kind of see and to talk to these people and I was 20 years old, and I was, you know, a student. I wasn't, you know, and they were all wanting me to take the story, and try to get it on the news, like, so that America could care what was going on to the Bhutanese refugees. And who's heard about Bhutanese refugees and the ethnic cleansing that was happening in Bhutan? It was another very difficult thing. And how do you try to help share a story like that? And how do you explain that it's not something that can be easily brought up with the American press and the American people to try to help solve some of the issues? Another independent project I did was at a sericulture farm, and in this project, the Lutheran World Service was helping women who'd been ousted from their families, whether sometimes their husband might have died or they were orphaned, and they were just sort of ostracized from the society. And this group would bring in these women and teach them to raise silkworms and spin silk, and then reintroduce them to their communities, where many of them became the most prosperous people in the communities and became community leaders. And it was a really another amazing experience. So anyway, I had this experience in Nepal, lasted about 5 months, and then I went home, and then I had to try to share my experience with my friends, and we'd go to a bar and I'd start telling a story about Nepal, and after a while my friends were rolling their eyes like, oh God, here he goes about Nepal again, you know, but it was just so beyond, I think, their comprehension of anything. It's nothing like, you know, it was just a really difficult experience to try to share, and it was very frustrating for me. One of the things that was kind of interesting is not only did it open my eyes to this very different culture, but in coming back to my country, I saw it in such a different light. I was so much more aware of how I lived and how people lived here, and so much, there was a lot more effort being put on decisions I made about how I lived and choices I made. And, you know, I learned that traveling not only gives you so much more insight into these other cultures, but there's no other better way to understand where you come from and where you live than to see it from an outsider's perspective. Now, sometimes it can make you very proud, and sometimes you can be absolutely horrified. And I definitely experienced both of those things. And ever since then, I've really been preaching the gospel of travel and getting away from your comfort zone, getting out of your culture, getting out of your country or your state. Anything you can do to expose yourself to different ways of life. Because there's a lot of different ways to live, and there's a lot of different cultures out there. And the world's a lot bigger than we know. I think we live in a very comfortable environment. We live in a very comfortable community, and it's very easy to just put one foot in front of the other and do what's expected of you and do what you think is the right thing because you're being marketed to a certain way. And I think, you know, you don't realize it until you're separated from it, that there's a lot of other choices out there. There's a lot of people living a lot of different ways, and it's great to see these choices so that you know early enough, you know, how you want to live. And that's why I think for the undergrads here who may be considering doing a study abroad program, I cannot emphasize how important and what a great opportunity it is, and that you should really, really seriously consider it, because it was definitely one of the best decisions I ever made. The other thing is it's a great way to travel to a very faraway place that can be a very expensive trip. You know, when I was there for the 5 months, I was so close to India, but I never went. Part of me thought, well, I'll go there next time, you know, next year or something. And what happens is, you know, I traveled extensively through the Far East, through the Far West, and I had a tremendously wonderful time in Nepal. Never saw India, but it wasn't until I got back home that I realized how far it was, how expensive it was, and it wasn't for about 8 or 9 years that I actually made it to India. I basically, when I got back, I spent a long time trying to figure out how do I get to India? How do I do it? And so I was studying film. At this point, I'd graduated from college. I'd moved to Seattle, and I started working in the film industry, what was left of the film industry at the time, because in a sense, we were kind of outsourcing. LA was outsourcing to Vancouver, where the dollar had gone down, and they'd offered a lot of tax incentives, and Seattle became what they call a flyover city. And the industry was sort of declining. There wasn't as much work. I did start working in independent films, doing location sound mixing. I was a cinematographer. I was an editor, and again, trying to be a director. I was able to get some grant money, and I started doing documentary film. I made a documentary about the subculture of bingo players that exist all around the world. And that was the launch of my documentary career. I started doing smaller documentaries and started exploring the world of grant writing. And I thought I was exposed in Nepal to Indian cinema and Bollywood, and it always fascinated me. And I thought it would be a really interesting way to introduce Americans to the Indian culture was through their cinema. India is one of the largest creators of cinema in the world. They produce more films there than anywhere else in the world. And it's a very specific kind of cinema. They're musical, adventure, action, comedy dramas that are, designed to give you every bit of your money's worth, in these 3.5-hour epics. And so I started writing grants. Unfortunately, this is mid-90s, and no one in the States really understood what Bollywood was, never heard the phrase, and it wasn't very easy. Although I did find some grant money, actually I didn't find grant money. My mother gave me frequent flyer miles, and it was a family grant. And I also had met a friend who had went to the University of Washington. His name was Viraj, and he lived in Mumbai, or Bombay, and also spent his time between there and Chennai. And so I knew he was going to be there, and he offered to put me up, and I got my frequent flyer miles, and I was off to India. And I arrived in Mumbai. And again, my experience over there was Nepal and the quaint villages of Nepal. And here I was in this insane city they call Mumbai. When I arrived there, the other thing, I'd been warned about this, but it was the only time I could go, and I went in May. Now, if there are any Indians out there, May is probably the worst time to go to India because it's the heat of the Indian summer, and it's right pre-monsoon. So it's 120 degrees, 100% humidity, and absolute misery. And I ended up staying in my friend's house with no air conditioning, and I had no money, so we were traveling by local means. But anyway, getting back to my first impressions of Mumbai, it was dirty. It was really dirty. And we were also spending time in some of the slums, doing some filming, looking at some of these underground cinemas that existed in these places. And it was really hard for me to adjust to some of the poverty I was seeing, and just the heat, and the way the dirt would stick to you, and the way when driving in a rickshaw, the public buses would stop right at you, and it was you practically had tailpipes sticking in your mouth, drinking the exhaust. And this is a little clever little kid. Whoops! I don't know if I can go back. Whoops! That's not right. But this guy. Anyway, the kid before there had built a raft, and on the other side of the water was where people could go to the bathroom, away from where they were living, and he was charging a couple rupees to ride people across. And so anyway, there was a lot of this dirt, and it was kind of depressing, and it was weird. But then you meet people, and these are some guys I met in the slum there, and they were so nice, and they were so inviting, and were very curious about me, and wanted to know more about what the heck I was doing in this slum, and why was I filming, and we talked about movies. And it was, again, I talk about the relationship and the turbulent romance and this love-hate relationship I started to have with India, because at times it was so difficult. Mumbai was a really difficult city, and I really didn't like it when I first got there. It wasn't what Nepal had been to me. It was a very different experience. But then the thing that started to win me over was the people. I started to meet the people, and I tell people when there's a lot of fear associated, I think, with India and with Americans. You watch films like Slumdog Millionaire or the Mira Nair film about the Chaiwala kid, and it's sort of very mysterious and dark and scary. But here I am in a plane about to land in Mumbai, and I've already been invited to a wedding. And it's like people were so excited to hear about me and my story, and they were the most gracious guests, no matter where I went. Whether I was interviewing people about my movie or about what it was like to be in India, and even if they weren't happy with the U.S. government, they would be sure to tell me, but they didn't make it a personal thing about me. They'd go out of their way to say, look, nothing against you, but what's up with this president, or what's going on with here, and we could have a nice discussion without it being like about me personally. And I couldn't stop thinking, how do these Indians feel when they come here? How do we treat them? Are we as gracious as they're treating me? And it got me thinking. There was also a lot of things I learned. There's, along the lines. And again, when I talk about traveling and I talk about going to places like India, you can fight it. You can fight it and bring your baggage and impose yourself. But just like any kind of relationship, a long-term relationship, there's give and take, and you can't just impose yourself on that person and expect the relationship to work. There's give and take. You need to accept that person for who they are, and make changes in yourself too at times. And it's like one of the things that happens in our movie with our guy. It's an American who's sort of lived in his bubble, and he takes all his baggage with him, expects everyone to operate the way they operated in the U.S. And it's just fighting a current, and it's never going to work. And when you're exploring a culture like that, there's no reason. I mean, a lot of people just fly in, they get in their air-conditioned coach, go to the hotel, and then go in there, and avoid what the country really is altogether. And I think it's really important to get out of that and get uncomfortable and see how people live and take some time to talk to the people, to the locals. But there are some. I'm going to give you quick 3 things to know about India. One of them is Indian Standard Time. Those of you who don't know what Indian Standard Time is, it's the operating standard for, basically when someone says, you never know when anything's going to happen, I guess. I don't even know how to explain it, come to think of it. But it works on its own clock. And, when people say they're going to meet you at 2 o'clock, you don't worry about being early. You never know what's going to happen, but they do work on their own clock. There's also this phrase that's very common in India. It's called no problem. And it's the kind of thing that struck fear in the heart of my line producers, the people who are in charge of the money when you make a movie, because when you expect budgets and instead you get no problem, we'll take care of it. What does that mean? And it is about trust, and a lot of doing business in India is about trust and relationships, and it's a lot different than in this country. And you do learn to let go to a certain degree, and trust people, and just put your hands. You just have to trust. And it's amazing how you can drive yourself crazy. And the more my producers would push for details and try to get more information out, the worse things got. Things never got done. And if someone said no problem and they said fine, okay, it would be done. You don't know how it got done. You don't want to know how it got done, but it's done. And it was just another part of the education of working in India. Another thing that's very curious is the Head Bobble, and there was a little bit about that in the trailer actually. And it's this common Indian gesture that kind of means yes, no, and maybe all together in one. And I'm still trying to figure it out. I did find myself doing it more frequently when I was there. But this is a little clip from the movie. Another thing I wanted to say was, cultural differences are funny. I mean, it's important to, they're not the only ones that are funny. We're very funny. You have to remove yourself and see yourself from their perspective. And in our movie, we wanted to make sure we were an equal opportunity offender. We weren't just making fun of Indians. We wanted to make fun of Americans too, because there's a lot to be made fun of. And it's very important to see the humor in it, I think, to break down these barriers and really kind of learn about another culture or other people. So this is just a quick, brief clip from the movie.
What's with all the tourists?
Oh, some famous caves.
Well, it feels like India anymore.
I could do it, you know.
Do what?
Your accent. If I had to, I could do it. I'll take one of them cheesehead hats.
Yeah, madam, no problem. We're having a cheesehead. What size did you wish to purchase?
You're not one of them outsourcers, are you? What's your name?
Oh, my name is Larry. May I kindly be having your credit card number?
If you're an American, what's our national bird?
Oh, yeah. It is a big vulture with a white head. Yarr.
Let me speak to your supervisor.
Certainly, sir. Hello, I'm the supervisor. How may I be helping you?
You sound just like the other guy.
Well, sir, some of us do sound alike. There are over 1 billion of us, you know.
That's terrible.
So, again, equal opportunity offenders, hopefully. And anyway, I've given you the background on Nepal and sort of my stories that were kind of inside me and really wanting to get out. So where did Outsourced come from? I was living in Seattle, and in Seattle, I'm kind of in the epicenter of outsourcing with Microsoft and Boeing, and hearing lots of stories about Indians being brought over and the Americans having to train their own replacements. And somewhere along the lines, it occurred to me that there might be an opportunity here to do the Foreigner in India movie by taking this guy who's been outsourced and sending him to India and force him to trace his replacement in India. And I felt like that was maybe a fun place to go with the story. And I pitched it to my friend George Wing, who's probably best known for writing the movie 50 First Dates for Adam Sandler. And just to give George his credit, the script for 50 First Dates was originally 50 First Kisses. Adam Sandler thought that sounded too gay, so he changed it to 50 First Dates. And then he went on to rewrite much of the script, adding tremendous amounts of bathroom humor and dumbing it down as much as possible for the mainstream audience, much to my writing partner's horror. We faced some of the same situations as we tried to get our movie made. I pitched him the idea, and he loved it, and we ran with it and wrote the script ourselves, and then shopped it around as a vehicle for me to direct my first feature film. We were greeted with a warm reception, a lot of producers, but the problem was that no one trusted me as a first-time director to direct the movie. They had a lot of other ideas about people. They also had ideas about stars, and they liked the idea of Ashton Kutcher, and they liked the idea of this romance, but they were like, there's all this cultural stuff. Can we kind of get rid of some of that and have the romance happen up in the beginning? So, and all of a sudden red flags were going up in George's head, and it's like, we're not doing this again. We want to make this movie on our terms. And we luckily found producers that were willing to do that in a company called Shadowcatcher that had success with a film called Smoke Signals many years ago. And they also were the first ones to be willing to consider me as a director for the film. So finally, I had another ticket back to India. Now, coming back this time around, I actually had a budget. So when we arrived in Mumbai, we actually stayed in a 5-star hotel, and it was a much different experience. And it was something my producers had insisted on, making sure we all stayed healthy and slept well. And just so people know, India is not all about slums and poor people. There's a tremendous amount of wealth in Mumbai. You have the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor living right next door to each other. And there is no shortage of wonderful hotels. In fact, when we did our budget, the budget for the film was about $2.5 million. If we had shot it in the U.S., it would probably been upwards of $8 million. We thought we might have even be able to do it for less, but it turned out that it was a lot more expensive to stay in Bombay than we expected. The hotels are very expensive. They're also booked. I mean, there's a lot of business going on in India, and there's a lot of people looking, for room. So it ended up being a little more expensive, but it's a very modern city, and there, it's been amazing going back and forth to India over the past, since I guess 2001 might have been the first year I was there. And then over, every year after that, I'd go back and there'd be new malls, and I'd be going to one of these malls, and I couldn't figure out if I was in Stamford, Connecticut, or Mumbai, India. And it's part of what I tell people is sort of a sad part of globalization, and that to me is that, it's the globalization in a sense is erasing some of the character we have with our smaller communities. And then there's the positive side that now they can buy cheap jeans and get all the stuff that that we have at our fingertips here. But it's the same way you go back to maybe the town you grew up in or the small towns in America, which we have seen sort of transforming into strip malls, and now I was seeing it over in India and losing some, and it was sad and good because the growth was tremendous. You couldn't help, if you were in India, you couldn't help but feel like we as Americans were kind of asleep at the wheel. We seemed so lethargic and lazy compared to the workforce that I was seeing in India. It was unbelievable, the competition that existed, and the excitement about education and about and the fight to get into universities. And it was, and to see the economy growing as fast as it was going, and it was a real wake-up call for me. Definitely, I was kind of amazed. Now, again, I think I talked a little bit about the love-hate relationship and the difficulties of traveling in India. And a lot of times getting around was in motor rickshaws. These were not designed for people over 6 feet tall. It was, again, one of the miserable experiences traveling by train and by rickshaw. I preferred riding in the back of a motorcycle. Is definitely the way to get through Bombay. I recommend it, although it's not the safest mode of transport. And the other thing I really loved was the food. As a vegetarian, there's hardly any place better in the world than India to find your food. And there's also the spoils of, there's the allure of the street food. Bombay street food is known by the locals as being absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, we as foreigners can't eat it. So it's very frustrating to be passing all this amazing street food. But the one thing we could have was the tea, because it was boiled, and sometimes it was a little sketchy as to how the utensils or the cups were washed, but for the most part it was boiled and it was safe to eat. And I always loved going to the street guys and getting my tea, and I was always the only white guy there sitting with the taxi drivers, drinking tea by the side of the road. And it's still one of my favorite things to do when I'm in India. And just to give you, you won't see this kind of thing in Starbucks. That's a cup of tea. That's what I like when I go to India. A lot of times people ask me, what do I think of outsourcing? What do I think of globalization? And I'm no expert, I'm no scholar on this sort of thing. I'm a traveler, I'm a filmmaker. I feel like outsourcing is inevitable. Is it good? Is it bad? It's inevitable. As long as we as consumers want the cheapest product we can get, it's going to happen. Where it's going to happen is going to vary. It might be happening in India and China now, and it may be the Philippines later, and it may end up back in the US as our labor force gets cheaper and cheaper, and the other economies grow stronger and stronger. And we touch on this a little bit in the film, and we try to stay pretty equal and encourage debate more than a right or wrong reference as to what it is. And again, I think I touched a little bit on globalization. The world is getting smaller, and there's good and bads about that. I mean, the great thing is the other parts of the world are a lot more accessible. I mean, now it's not that hard to get across the globe and to experience these other places. The other problem is you might, leave a Starbucks in Seattle and then go to Starbucks in, anywhere. It almost doesn't matter. And especially these major cities. They're losing some of their character as some of these corporations have sort of set up and building their infrastructures around them. And there's a comfort in that. I don't, I don't, you know, there's times where you want your Starbucks, and it's great that it's there wherever country you're in. But it's also, I think, really important to get away from that and experience the culture itself. Now, in the movie, I meant to tell you this before we watched the clip, but this is not, the movie's not about a Microsoft call center. It's not about a high-tech call center. One of the things I wanted to do in making the movie was get away from high-tech. I didn't want it to be about Microsoft outsourcing someone, so I didn't want him to go from an air-conditioned office in Seattle to a high-tech office in Mumbai. But what I was instead looking at was something that was more visual than high-tech. So we created this business called Western Novelty, an American memorabilia company that sells things like cheesehead hats and burger brands, and which were much more visual and much more difficult for an American to explain to an Indian. And these things that we do buy, why do we buy? I don't know why we buy them, but we do. And that was more interesting. And so the idea of Western Novelty, this novelty company, they're not going to be able to afford the kind of outsourcing that Microsoft would. And I was reading a lot about Bangalore has sort of been the capital of BPO, outsourcing companies. And Bangalore has gotten so modern and so expensive, they started going to Mangalore. And then Mangalore is building up and it's becoming expensive. So I was thinking, well, where's the next place? Whatever that next place is, that's where my guy's going. It's the cheapest of the cheap, and it's the new small town that's being developed for IT. And so, the call center that we built was really a metaphor for the growth of India. I wanted the building to have rebar sticking out the top, suggesting that there's several more levels that are going to be built onto this thing. And it's also, to me, I kept seeing India growing at a rate that it could hardly keep up with. They were building these huge infrastructures, these new developments where people were going to live, but everyone who was living in the area said, well, they're beautiful, but I don't know how they're going to have running water, and I don't know how the sewage is going to be dealt with. And it was this idea of just this growth and then trying to keep up with this amazing growth that was happening. So the idea was to build this call center and to have it functioning before it was even completed. So you'll see in some of the clips that the back wall still hasn't been completed in the thing. And of course, I went to India, spent time in call centers, and we went to an area called Pune, which was a new town that was developing, and I was trying to find a call center to see if, is there really a call center in a field, and to see if I could find that, and I found one. And here was this modern call center in the middle of this field, and there was cows walking by it, and it was this little town that was being developed. Of course, we couldn't afford to build a set like that. Ours was definitely smaller, but it was amazing to see that this was in fact happening. And there's a lot of people who give me some grief, like this is not believable, but I definitely spent time there, and it's amazing. So again, I talked about fighting the current and dipping your toes in and not giving yourself completely to it. And now here is another scene from the movie where Todd is trying to impose himself on his new employees.
Hello, everyone. I'm Todd Anderson from Western Novelty, and I'm here to help integrate you into our business. Now, I gotta tell you, the center's numbers are nowhere near what they should be. And based on the customer complaints we've been having, it's a culture thing. Basically, you people need to learn about America. Now, it's all about bringing down the MPI. Things go faster if the customer feels they're talking to a native English speaker.
But we are native English speakers. English is the official language of our government. You got it from the British, and so did we. We just speak it differently. I mean, sometimes our pronunciation is better. We say internet, and you say internet.
Fair enough, but that's exactly my point. I'm asking you to say internet. All right, next time you're on a call, try to listen carefully to the customer's pronunciation, their slang, small talk. Try to learn from them. Learn about America.
Sir.
Yes, you are?
Man-meat.
Man-meat.
No, man-meat. What I want to know is, what is small talk?
It's like, so how you doing today? How's the weather in Arizona? You can talk about sports.
Like cricket.
All right, never mind. Forget sports. You want to sound American. If anyone asks where you're located, just say Chicago. All right? Try that.
Chicago.
Okay. When you make the ah sound, hold your nose and flatten the vowel, like Chicago.
Chicago.
It's great. And if anyone asks how the weather is, just say windy. Yes, you are?
Asha, sir. Isn't that a little dishonest? I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm not in Chicago, I'm in Kharagpur. Look, when I was hired to do this job, I was told that I would be selling products to a customer on a telephone. I did not know we had to be deceptive.
Well, a lot of Americans are upset about outsourcing.
But sir, most of the products they're buying are made in China.
Okay, we're almost back. We'll continue this tomorrow. Thank you.
It says made in China on the box.
Okay. The wonderful Aisha Dakar is fantastic actress. Now, another major difference in India is sort of private versus public behavior, something that's very different. We deal with it a little bit in the relationship in the movie. It's funny because relationships are, there's not a lot of public attention between men and women in India. And when we first got there, my cinematographer is actually gay, and when we were there was, what's interesting is that men and women don't show affection towards each other, but the men are often hugging each other and holding hands, and to an American, of course, my cinematographer is looking around, he's like, oh my God, everyone's gay. And it was really funny. I mean, it was just a very different way to be affectionate, and so that was another thing that was kind of strange. And you had to be very cautious if you were a man and a woman wanting to be together, and also very small communities, and you didn't want to be seen by people, and you kind of sneak off, and there were certain areas you could go and kiss under the bridge or something. And it was that was something else a very big difference that we had to deal with in the movie. Now, another thing on the other side of things, when it came to questioning personal, making being very blunt, it wouldn't be strange for someone to ask directly how much you made, what your salary was, and very personal questions. And so there was a lot of that, which was very strange and kind of difficult to get used to. As well as this sort of issue of personal space, something we as Americans kind of like and enjoy. But in India, you've got a lot of people in a small amount of space, and they're very used to being around each other. And personal space, well, it's just not something everyone is familiar with. And so we did a little sort of behind-the-scenes bit of dealing with this, and I was just going to show that real quickly.
India is a very friendly and open community, and I always am constantly being asked over to people's houses for tea. But at the same time, there's this tremendous lack of personal space, which I think can be very shocking to an American coming to the country. And that's something I really wanted to explore in the film, is this idea of this loss of personal space.
11, take 1, Mark.
Background and action.
I mean, the experience that Todd has on the train, that was the experience I had, being with a friend and trying to get onto one of these trains, and they're so crowded that you just have to push your way on. And I mean, it's really insane, and they're moving and trying to find a space, and it's just, you're packed in like sardines. And then once you get in there, there's just absolutely no sense of personal space. Everyone's just in everyone else's face. And then to get off, you literally are pushing. I feel, you have to push your way. The doors never close, and you have to push your way to the exits before you get to anticipating your stop. So I mean, you're packed so tight, you just feel like, how can you possibly move without shifting someone out of the train and onto the tracks?
I'm holding my bag right now and trying to not get it sucked out with this tide of people.
And it was a really kind of insane experience for me, going on one of these trains, and it definitely planted the seeds for this poor guy who's experiencing this train ride for the first time, and the idea of sort of the loss of personal space, which happens when you travel to places like India.
I've got to hurry up now. Do you want me to show the Burger Brand clip? Again, I'll just zip through a couple more clips of the movie. This is again Todd trying to explain about America.
And I do not understand item H403.
H403. A lot of Americans wear these to sporting events.
But why, sir?
It's hard to explain. You just do. Yes.
I don't understand the purpose of A221.
A221. That's a burger brand. Americans eat a lot of beef, and some people like to burn their initials into their food with a red-hot iron before they eat it.
Why?
It's like a cattle brand. You know, the thing you use to burn a symbol into a cow with? No, in America, that's how you keep track of your cows, is branding.
With a red-hot iron?
Yeah.
But wouldn't the cow run away?
Oh, no, we only do it to baby cows. When they're small enough to hold them down. Yes, Asha?
A suggestion, Mr. Todd.
Go ahead.
We need to learn about India.
Okay. And this is another quick one, which is an explanation sort of how miscommunication can quickly sort of spiral out of control.
I told you it's my grandson's first day at school. I want to get him some supplies, but I'm not sure what kids need these days.
Perhaps some rubbers, ma'am.
What did you say?
I mean, if you have a pencil, you need some rubbers.
Okay. Who can tell me what was wrong with this call? It's not a rubber. It's an eraser.
No, sir. This is a rubber.
No, it's an eraser. A rubber means condom.
Oh, you mean like a flat? No, they call it an apartment.
No, a condom. Birth control.
Does it work?
So, all right. So, sort of in closing, the most important thing that I really want to get across to the younger people in the audience, in particular the people who are undergrads, is get out of here. Go away, travel, see the world, and when you do, let go of your baggage. Don't just dip your toes in, but take the plunge. Give yourself into the country, and you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a great time. The difficult times will be stories you can tell your grandkids and you can laugh about eventually after the dysentery wears off and other issues. And it's just the number of the people that you're going to meet, the things you're going to see, and the experiences you bring back are just so rich and rewarding. And I just can't express enough what an opportunity studying abroad is, and to not be afraid to choose somewhere a little different than you might expect to go, and challenge yourself. And like I said, spending the time I did overseas was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, and it certainly changed my mind and the way I think and the way I live. And I just hope that you take advantage of that and do see the world. And I think that you won't regret it. So please take the plunge. And if you like the movie, definitely it's available on Netflix. It's available at Holly's Video, my favorite video store when I am in Rhode Island. And also on Amazon.com and at OutsourcedTheMovie.com. Also, there's some clips that maybe I'll give you links to if anyone wants to see things like the one I showed you. So, namaste. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that anyone might have at this point.
Wasn't that a wonderful presentation? So as the timekeeper, obviously I cut him short because I'm hoping that some of you will have some questions. So we have a microphone over there for any questions on any topic that you want to ask that John can answer.
If someone's shy, they can shout it out and I'll repeat the question. Okay.
Now, John was very generous. He went into several classes during the day. We took full advantage of his presence. So we told the students that in order to communicate how interested we are as URI students and to convince John how interested we are, we have to ask questions. So please, do line up and ask some questions. Dave?
Hi, John. I saw you this afternoon in the honors class. I didn't have a chance to ask a question because I didn't want to upstage the students.
Sure.
But having watched Slumdog Millionaire and also a production done by one of our own graduates here, a guy by the name of Ross Kaufman, who did something called Born into Brothels. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes,
movie.
fantastic film, yeah.
There was a real controversy about, you know, the social implications, particularly about Born into Brothels. This notion that, you know, you introduce some development, you kind of introduce the students or whomever to a better lifestyle and whatever, and then there's this real disconnect. And it happened in Slumdog Millionaire with some of these young people who were brought to the Academy Awards. Just wondering what your feelings are about, you know, that kind of tension and whether it's fair to the actors or the students who were particularly Born into Brothels.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really tricky question, and it's not an easy one to answer. We did work with some children in our movie, and the way that worked was we worked with an organization. I wasn't really happy with the actors, the child actors that were auditioning, and I wanted people who were more authentic. And I was introduced to a nonprofit called Akanksha, which is a nonprofit that takes underprivileged youth and teaches them theater to kind of build confidence. And I was brought to one of their performances and ended up casting quite a few of the kids in my movie, and then also asking to meet their parents and relatives and cast them as well. I think most Indians have an innate ability to act. There's this dramatic element built into the culture, and it was fantastic to kind of tap into it. But it was how to pay these children. It was a difficult thing my producers had to deal with. Was how do you pay these people? And they wouldn't let us. We couldn't pay in our situation, we couldn't pay the kids. We had to actually pay them as a donation to the organization, and it was strange. And what happened with Slumdog Millionaire and bringing the kids to the Oscars was a big marketing thing, but it was also, if they did, it was kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. What do you do? I mean, I'm sure they compensated. What is the right amount to pay these kids? You don't pay them Hollywood salaries. It's because it's a different scale when you're paying actors in India, but then how do you compensate them in a way that's reasonable? And I think it's a really tricky thing, because almost no matter what you do, it's going to rub somebody the wrong way, and it's going to be a difficult decision. And the Born into Brothels one that's a whole even stickier one, and unfortunately I don't know that I have any answers for that. It's my film wasn't as successful, so I didn't have to really worry about it. But thanks for the question. Other questions? Yes. Sure, if I repeat the question, is that okay? Or? Okay, yeah. If you can walk the mic, if there's those of you who can't get out of your seat, I'll repeat the question.
Listening to you speak just brought back memories for me. When I was 21 years old, I graduated from this university, and that was in 1973. I saved my money. I ended up in India, and I hitchhiked through India for 3 months.
Wow.
And then hiked in the Himalayas for a month. So your stories really brought back memories of that sort of love-hate relationship and space and privacy issues. I'm wondering, when I was hitchhiking, I never saw any cars. I only got rides with truck drivers, and I'm wondering what it would be like for a young person today. You're telling them to take the plunge. Is India that much different today in terms of the sense of adventure you would have as a young person? Or do you need to be involved with a group Like, I was by myself. So
yeah.
It was an eye-opener for me. It transformed my life. I'm wondering, is it that much different today?
You know, I think one of the reasons I really push it on students who have the option to study abroad is that the way that when I was 20, I turned 21 in Nepal, and there's no way I could have done what I did in that program on my own. I mean, it was enough hand-holding, but also they really, literally sent us. I mean, that first week we were there, when I was in that village, when our homestay was done, they left us, and we had to find our way back on our own. And that was a 2.5-day trip back to Kathmandu that we had to figure out ourselves. We had to get our own transportation. We had to find our way back, and that was hopping on trucks and finding different ways. But it still, there was that security net of my professors and teaching. And I think it's a great way to do it the first time. Then once you have a familiarity with the culture and the country, and it's easier to maybe go out on your own. I just was too shy to ever have done what you did on my own. I needed to be broken in with a program that kind of helped me understand the culture, and it really taught me to be aware of other cultures and to pick up things and to be responsible and be respectful, to my hosts. And when you know how to do that, they're even more receptive and doors open, and it's a good thing. But has India changed? India is changing constantly. Every time I go back, I'm amazed. I mean, it can be a very comfortable trip, but then again, I know stories about one of my producer's friends. She, a woman who decided to go on a trip to India, flew into Mumbai, got in the cab to go to her hotel. It's about a 45-minute, hour drive to get to the hotel, depending on what time of day you come in. She got halfway there, and it was too intense. She turned around and went back and flew home. The trip from the airport to your hotel is very intense, and it's very shocking for a lot of people. But I think, it's still possible to travel like that. And like I said, a lot of the development's happening in the cities. So it's very easy to get out of the cities and visit little villages and get a good, experience that's not the experience of living in an international city, and probably similar to what you were doing with the trucks and traveling, and certainly finding people and hiking in the Himalayas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. I'm in the Honors Colloquium class, and I know we've been talking a lot about the technology and especially the automobile industry and how that's been affecting India. And I was just wondering about the traffic and if you noticed a lot about that, because I went to China this summer, and I know that the surge of automobiles has just been popular, in recent years, in recent decades, and the traffic really hit me because a lot of people are just getting cars, even taxis. So it was absolutely crazy, unlike anything I've ever seen, even in New York. So I was wondering if you had the same experience.
Yeah.
Really, I couldn't believe it, and I think it's going to stay with me my whole life. So I was wondering if you had any of the same experiences in Mumbai or any of the bigger cities, more international.
Yeah, the traffic in Mumbai is worse than any place I've ever been to in my life. It was absolutely horrendous. And of course, they've just introduced a new car. I forgot the name of it, but it's very inexpensive, and all of a sudden, it's within the means of a lot of the new middle class in India. And so to think that all of a sudden people are going to start buying more cars that are already on the road, not along just the buses and the cabs and the rickshaws. Traffic doesn't really, during the day, it doesn't really go that fast. So somehow there's this weird, it's amazing there's not more accidents. I don't know how it happens, but I think it's because the traffic never gets to be too fast. But then you have issues at night when there's not as much traffic, where they drive at unbelievable speeds, and it's frightening. And I saw my life pass by my eyes many, many times as we whizzed by cars and nearly hit pedestrians, and it's frightening. And I don't know that it's going to get any better. They have just started building more highways. When I was last there, they just built a highway from Bombay to Goa, and it was more of it was the first time I'd been on a road that was like a modern highway here. The only problem is it wasn't completely finished. So when we were going down it, there'd be sections of the highway which all of a sudden there'd be huge piles of rocks in the middle of the highway that were merging you to the oncoming traffic on the other side of the highway without any signs, and you just had to flash your lights so the people coming at you at 60, 70 miles per hour knew to kind of get out of the way and just pray that you're going to be merged back into your lane. soon. I mean, really frightening. And I think that one of the classes I spoke to, you know, I was always trying to figure out, I didn't fit in the cabs, the rickshaws, or the buses. And one of the classes earlier, I said in Nepal, I'd figured out that sometimes just standing in the doorway of the bus and hanging onto the bar was much more comfortable. And then then eventually realized that every once in a while I could talk the bus driver into letting me sit on the top of the bus. And so sometimes I'd sit up on top of the bus with luggage and some chickens, and I'd lay down and look. And this is in Nepal, and in Nepal the roads go along these mountainsides and along all these blind curves, and you're just barreling around the corners, and then, you know, it's just, you just close your eyes and you just think, if I die, I die. That's the way it was meant to be, you know. And I'm going to lay back here and watch the monkeys swing in the trees and enjoy this surreal atmosphere of what I'm experiencing right now. So yeah, travel is crazy, and traffic, and in Nepal with all the traffic with the rickshaws, and I don't know. This is back in '93, so I don't know if they've got better emission standards now, and I think they do, but the pollution, you know, from the rickshaws was so bad. Like if you blew your nose, it was just black. It was pretty gross. You know, again, in the heat, when it's really hot and humid and the dirt's sticking to you and the exhaust pipes are sticking in your face, you wish yourself dead at times. And when you're stuck in traffic and that bus is next to you, again, that's one of the hardships of travel. Yes. How do I get used to the poverty? You don't really get used to it. You learn to live with it, I guess. It's the reality of traveling in Bombay. When you get stopped at that red light, someone doesn't come with a squeegee to watch your windows. It's a 5-year-old girl carrying an infant knocking on your window asking for change, and it's really difficult. I don't know if you get used to it. You never really get. There's my favorite photographer, Steve Mccurry, has done amazing photographs of India, and he's got a very famous one with this little girl holding a baby looking through the window of a cab, and that picture just captures that experience so well for me. And not only kids, but people who've been either born with deformities or even mutilated coming up, people in India, they tell me, it's life. It's we don't, we just live with life all around us, and we don't ignore it. But it's just part of the way of living. And my cinematographer who worked with me, he just said India is it's like experiencing everything all the time, in your face, and it's very intense. But you do, we are, as humans, I guess, do find ways to adapt to all kinds of things. And I don't say you get used to it, but you do, it just becomes part of living there. And it's tough. So what's next is the question. Right? Excuse me? Am I going to another country or expanding on India? I would love to do more travel. Right now I'm actually doing a series of documentaries on Seattle bands for MTV, actually, which is a very local thing, and it's nice to be working at home and in my own little community. But I do have a script I'm working on that would bring me back to India, bring me back to Bombay, and it's more of a Outsourced really looked at life in a smaller village and the development of this small village. And I'm really curious. The story I want to tell is more about an American couple who have a 17-year-old son who gets sent to India, and sort of this 17-year-old who goes from being middle-class America to going to high school in Mumbai and living in a place, living in a house with servants and a cook and a driver, and what do teenagers? What's it like growing up as a teenager in modern Mumbai? And that's really exciting to me, and there's a lot of interesting stories there, and I'm hoping to explore that and show a more modern side of Indian culture and life. And I'd love to go back and do that. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and this sort of frustration that comes from, just to reiterate a bit, you know, when you having an issue and you call a customer support line, and not only are you dealing with the anger and frustration of the problem at hand, but then all of a sudden you're met with an Indian accent or a Filipino accent or something, and which angers you even more because of, you know, what's going on behind the scenes, and that is, you know, that is absolutely, you know, I think the case with so many people can relate to that, and and also Americans have a lot of trouble with accents too. So a lot of times you'll be speaking to this Indian and not knowing what the heck, if they're speaking English or Hindi or Tamil or whatever. And now I'm starting to get there's a whole nother thing where it's like you can't even get the human, you get the computer, and I end up yelling at this computer because I can't even talk to a human. Or it's maybe you know, at times I'm wishing I could get that Indian accent I didn't understand, so I could at least have something human that's speaking to me. And then on the other side, it's like, you know, the Indians who are being given these scripts and this system that's been built by these American companies and then sent to these countries, and they're meant to be read like robots, and they, you know, you ask these questions and they're sitting there trying to find a script that best matches an answer that you might want to hear, but sometimes it sounds like they're not listening to you, and it's like, why can't you just speak to me? And it's like, that's they're trained, this is the way they're supposed to respond, and it's part of the system that we've created to produce the cheapest goods we can offer you, and it's part of the way the whole system works, and it doesn't really work that well a lot of the time. And it's also, you know, these Indians, you know, we don't have a lot of it in the movie, but what some of these people go through, the abuse that they take from Australians and Americans and other people, English-speaking people it's shocking, some of the stuff that they deal with, and we didn't really want to go there in the movie because some of it was really just off color and terrible, actually, and very racist, and there's a whole other bit that we wanted to kind of stay away from. But there's a lot of issues on both sides, and it's like I don't know, it's a long discussion. There's a lot to talk about, you know, when that comes. But I understand your point. And there was one woman actually after one of the screenings of our film, and she came up afterwards and said, "Oh my God, I was just on the phone with Indian tech support the other day, and I feel so bad." You know, after watching this movie, I feel so bad. And people do start think more about when they get that. I think after seeing the movie, they may still be angry, but there's a curiosity that comes with it too. And it's funny how I've had tech people and they get on and they're like robots, and then I'm like, well, where are you? And they're reluctantly like, oh, India, you know, and like, oh, we're in India, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you're not mad, and they open up and they become human, and it's like, and we end up having a good conversation, and it becomes more of a human interaction as opposed to this robotic system that we've kind of set up. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Sure, culture shock when I wish I was home. Absolutely, I wish I had a teleporter and I'd press a button and I'd immediately be transported back to my bed in Seattle. There was absolutely moments like that, like when I'd be sitting in traffic in a rickshaw with a bus tailpipe in my face, you know, and other moments when I'd be sick. And in Nepal, there was a place that we would go when we needed a fix, a grilled cheese sandwich or or a brownie with ice cream on it. And there was a place called Mike's Breakfast, and it was run by an expat. And it was like this little haven in Kathmandu, and it was where all of us foreigners would go when we just couldn't handle. Well, we needed that little touch of home. And then there was another place that was a pizza place. I can't remember they had there, and they'd show movies and you could get pizza. And I remember having a hard time and really missing home and feeling really out of place. and wandering into this place, and I got a pizza, and they showed a movie called The Commitments, which is a British film, and I'd seen it before, and I thought it was okay, but this time it took on a whole new meaning. It was like, I'm not British, but it was like, I was so emotional, and I was so into it, and and then I think they showed like Unforgiven afterwards, and I watched Clint Eastwood, and I was like, it was just amazing how much more I got out of the movies when I was so far removed from home, and that to me was those little places. You can find these little pockets that exist all over the place, and you get that little bit of home, and then you kind of, batteries are recharged, and then you can kind of face another day in this new place. Questions? What's that? Namaste is a greeting, and it essentially, I believe, means it's sort of pleased to meet your soul, this is what I've been told. Is that somewhat, that's at least in Nepal. I bow to you. Well, they use it both in Nepali and Hindi, and when I was studying Nepali, they told us it was sort of an exchange between two people, basically like, it's a pleasure to meet you, but I was also told it was like a pleasure for our souls to meet, sort of greeting and also goodbye. Yes, in the way back. That's a really good question, and the question is the tremendous economic growth. Is it trickling down? Is it where's it going? And are the poor getting any richer, or are the richer just getting richer? And how is it being dispersed? Again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a scholar on any of this, but from my experience, what I've seen and what this whole new growth of call center businesses. You're seeing an emergence of a middle class that hasn't really existed before. Young people, 17 to 20, to the mid-20s, who are working at call centers, making a lot of money, and having disposable income for the first time in their lives. And we're talking about an Indian culture where it's very traditional for families to stay together. The kids live with their parents, even sometimes after they're married. The families will live with the parents. And now you're getting young kids, 18 years old, who decide they're going to put off college for a little bit, work at a call center, make some money, and all of a sudden they can afford their cell phones, they can get their own apartment, and they go through this cultural training where they're, watching movies like American Pie and Friends, and getting an idea of what they think it's like to be living in America and being an American. And they start going out to clubs, and it's shocking. It was shocking to me to see how it was affecting some of them, and to see these young people adapting some of the worst that our culture has to offer, and then it becoming part of the new Indian culture and the new middle class, and so a lot of the money definitely is going to create this new middle class who are going to be buying these new cheap cars and populating things, and with a lot of disposable income. I don't think much of the money is getting down too far. I think you're still going to have that lower class who are going to be the drivers and the cleaners, and the very lower class. And I don't know how without them, I don't know how India would be able to function the way it does. So if they do start to get empowered, it's going to be a real interesting time for India, and some major changes will have to happen. But for the most part, I think the rich are getting richer. There's a middle class that is growing, and these malls are popping up to service them, but there is still a tremendous amount of poverty and issues. We're done. And I think on that note, I'm finished. So thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you very much, Jake. One of the questions that didn't get addressed, I think, that John raised was, not only do you learn about cultures when you travel, how do you deal with other cultures in your own country? So tell me, am I speaking English? Can you understand me? But if you didn't see me in this lecture hall where we are talking about demystifying India, and you saw me at Marshall's or one of the stores, and I wore my sari, and I spoke to you, would you think I speaking English? I can tell you, it's amazing how many people in South County think I do not speak English. So those whole issues of cultural learning doesn't need to happen only by traveling abroad. It needs to happen also here. And so, part of our mission in demystifying India and to bring India to you is to make you experience India even here. You have colleagues, you have neighbors, you have restaurants who are Indians. Experience them. Next time you see me in this, just don't think I'm speaking Hindi, because I am speaking English. I did learn it from the British, just like you did. So let's give a wonderful hand to John.
Oh, really? Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, about a week, so.
Oh, well, you're going to have a great time, I'm sure. Yeah, no problem.
Safe trip home, okay?
All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm 37.